The January wind scraped across the cornfields of Aledo, Illinois, carrying the bitter scent of ash. In the distance, a dull orange glow pulsed against the night sky. Firefighters arrived expecting a brush fire, but as their headlights swept the clearing, the smoke parted to reveal something that didn't belong. In the clearing, the smoke parted to reveal something human. A boot, a scrap of denim, flesh fused to earth. One firefighter whispered, "God, it's a body." Detectives from the Mercer County Sheriff's Office combed the scene under harsh portable lights. The ground was blackened, soaked with fuel. Amid the ash, small details the flames had spared: a silver bracelet, a hair tie, and, half buried in the dirt, a cracked ring. The forensics team worked methodically. Photographs, measurements, samples scraped from charred bone. Every detail logged because the victim no longer had a name. Whoever burned this body had tried to erase its story, but evidence, like memory, resists oblivion. By dawn, the field looked less like a crime scene and more like the aftermath of something ritualistic. In police radio chatter, one phrase repeated, "female, possibly teenage." At the morgue, the coroner examined what little remained. The bones told a tale of violence, a crushed trachea, fractures from strangulation. Someone had taken her breath before taking her name. Meanwhile, in nearby East Moline, a 16-year-old girl's parents waited by the phone, thinking she'd just missed curfew. They would soon learn the fire in that field wasn't random. It was a grave. The case that would haunt an entire town had begun, not with a scream, but with the hiss of gasoline catching flame. Just 2 weeks before that fire scorched the Illinois soil, 16-year-old Adrienne Reynolds had been chasing a different kind of heat, the spark of a new beginning. It was early January 2005 when she arrived in East Moline, transferring from Kilgore, Texas. The move was meant to be a reset, a way to finish school and plan her future. Her father described her as fearless, restless, and hungry for independence. She dreamed of becoming a dancer, maybe joining the Navy afterward. Adrienne enrolled at Black Hawk College Outreach Center, a small alternative high school where students carried half-formed ambitions and quiet defiance. She stood out immediately, dyed dark hair, quick laughter, and a confidence that made others uneasy. Within days, she'd found new friends, or at least she thought she had. That's where she met Sarah Kolb, another 16-year-old who radiated control. Sarah wasn't loud. She didn't have to be. People moved around her like planets in orbit. Teachers called her smart. Students called her dangerous. And then there was Corey Gregory, 17, tall and quiet, often trailing a few steps behind Sarah. He admired her, maybe feared her, definitely loved her in the confused way teenagers sometimes do. When Adrienne joined their circle, she brought light into their shadowed dynamic. She and Corey talked easily, laughed often, shared songs and secrets. To outsiders, it looked like a normal teenage triangle, except triangles have sharp points. Sarah watched their closeness with a tightening jaw. The whispers started small. That Adrienne was flirting. That she wanted Corey. That she thought she could take what wasn't hers. Her journal, later found by police, revealed hopes of belonging, and lines pressed harder into the page as fear grew. Teachers noticed tension. A counselor would later recall Adrienne mentioning girl drama, brushing it off with a laugh. "It's fine," she said. "We're just figuring things out." Those were the final calm days. In the quiet halls of Black Hawk Outreach, jealousy was ripening like rot beneath the floorboards. No one could see it yet, but something poisonous was blooming behind Sarah Kolb's smile, a darkness that would soon swallow them all. Every school has its hierarchy, and in the narrow halls of Black Hawk Outreach, Sarah Kolb ruled the social food chain. She had that calculated charisma that drew people in and made them nervous at the same time. Teachers called her mature, Friends called her unpredictable, charming one moment, a storm the next. She carried herself like someone used to control. Her old silver car smelled of cigarettes and cheap perfume, her friends following it like a throne on wheels. She could turn affection into a weapon and loyalty into leverage. Corey Gregory learned that the hard way. At 17, Corey wasn't cruel, just quiet, the kind who faded into background photos. Sarah made him feel visible, even needed. To her, he was a pawn. To him, she was everything he wasn't, fearless, commanding, untouchable. When Adrienne arrived, that balance cracked. For the first time, Corey laughed with someone else. Adrienne's openness disarmed him, but to Sarah it looked like betrayal. What was innocent to one was intolerable to the other. Witnesses later told police they saw the shift. Sarah glared when Adrienne spoke, mocked her in whispers, told others the new girl didn't know her place. One classmate remembered her saying, half-jokingly, "I could kill that girl." No one thought she meant it. By mid-January, their tension was open gossip. Sarah accused Adrienne of rumors. Adrienne denied it. Corey tried to calm things, but only sank deeper. In recovered messages, Sarah's tone had turned cold. "She's fake. She's trying to mess with me. I'll take care of it." At school, the trio still smiled for appearances. Beneath that calm, Sarah was setting a trap. She began telling friends she just wanted to talk things out after class, to clear the air. That lie would become the snare. In the days ahead, jealousy would harden into rage, and rage would spark the fire seen from miles away. The queen bee had chosen her prey, and her shadow was already waiting to strike. Friday, January 21st, 2005, an unremarkable winter day in East Moline. The air was sharp, the sky a dull gray. Students at Black Hawk Outreach drifted through the morning, thinking about the weekend. Adrienne Reynolds had plans, lunch with Sarah Kolb and Corey Gregory. It was supposed to clear the air after weeks of tension. She told a classmate, "We're fine now. We're just going to talk." At 11:45 a.m., surveillance footage showed the three leaving school together. Sarah drove her silver car, Corey in the passenger seat, Adrienne in the back. They stopped at the Taco Bell on Avenue of the Cities, a teenage hangout where gossip was usually the worst thing to spread. Witnesses saw them laughing, eating, acting normal. Nothing seemed wrong except Sarah's stare, cold and fixed every time Adrienne spoke. When lunch ended, Sarah suggested a drive. According to court testimony, she wanted to finish the conversation privately. Adrienne agreed, believing the truce was real. Around 12:20 p.m., they left the parking lot, turning toward a secluded spot near Blackhawk Road. That was the last time anyone saw Adrienne Reynolds alive. Investigators later pieced together the next hour from Corey's confession and Sarah's shifting accounts. The argument began with rumors and jealousy, but Sarah had already decided how it would end. Days earlier, she'd told friends she could take care of Adrienne if she wanted to. Inside the car, the talk turned to shouting. Adrienne tried to defend herself. Corey claimed he tried to stop them, but Sarah lunged from the front seat, pulling Adrienne's hair, striking her again and again. The violence built fast. At around 12:45 p.m., in that parked car, Sarah wrapped a belt around Adrienne's neck. Corey froze, then helped hold her down. The medical examiner later described the injuries: a fractured larynx, burst capillaries, signs of strangulation. Adrienne's body went still. Sarah leaned back, breathing hard. Corey told detectives the silence after was unbearable. Then Sarah spoke. Now she can't talk anymore. Outside, the wind swept across the empty road, carrying away the last sound of Adrienne's life. From that parking lot to the field of fire, their path was already mapped. The night of June 6th, 2002, breathed heat like something alive. Idaho Falls was wrapped in a heavy summer stillness, broken only by the hum of streetlights and tires on wet asphalt. Cassie Jo's friends later said she felt off, like something unseen was pacing behind her. The party at Whispering Cliffs was fading, music low, laughter gone. Angie Dodge's old house, once marked by blood and rumor, lingered across town as a silent warning. Cassie wasn't thinking about that yet. She was thinking about the late hour, the scent of rain and gasoline, and how the two boys, Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, kept glancing at each other more than at her. When she slid into the back seat, the air felt charged. The boys' banter was stiff, their laughter hollow. Tori joked about Scream, calling it a classic. Brian said, "Real horror's better when it's real." Cassie smiled politely, unaware they'd already begun filming her fate. The car rolled through the sleeping town, headlights sweeping mailboxes and driveways. Cassie's reflection flickered in the glass, half light, half shadow. Tori drove. Brian filmed. A camera clicked. They told her it was for fun. But in the dim dashboard glow, Brian's grin looked too wide. At a red light, Tori stared straight ahead, knuckles white on the wheel. "It's all about legacy," he muttered. "You remember that line in Scream, being famous for something unforgettable?" Brian laughed softly. "We'll make our own movie." The light turned green. The car moved forward. Cassie looked between them, uneasy. Thunder murmured in the distance. They dropped her at the Stoddard house, a quiet home outside town where she was house-sitting for relatives. She thanked them and stepped out, unaware of the way they watched her disappear up the driveway. Brian lifted the camera and whispered, "She has no idea." And in that instant, the night itself seemed to hold its breath. The storm was coming. The dawn after September 22nd, 2006, broke pale and sickly, as if the sun itself recoiled from what it had to expose. At the edge of a ravine near Blackfoot, Idaho, two boys stood in the mud, surrounded by the smell of gasoline and smoke. Their clothes clung to their skin, darkened not just by rain, but by something far more lasting. Brian Draper's hands trembled as he unzipped the duffel bag. Inside were the remnants of their imagined legend, gloves, masks, knives, and a camcorder smudged with fingerprints. "We can't keep this," Tori muttered, voice hollow, as if something inside him had come undone during the night. The footage was gone, deleted in panic, but when Brian accidentally hit playback, fragments remained. A laugh, a scream, static. He slammed the button to stop it, face pale. "Bury it," Tori hissed. The ravine swallowed their secrets piece by piece. Knives glinted once before vanishing into wet soil. Masks followed, faceless and slick. The gloves landed with a soft thud, hands that had held death, now buried by trembling ones. Brian stared down. "Do you think they'll find her phone?" "They won't find anything," Tori said, eyes fixed on the ground. "We did this right." When they set the fire, it spread fast, grass snapping, smoke curling upward in frantic spirals. The air filled with the stench of melting plastic, burning leather, and something worse. Brian turned away, coughing, as the smoke rose like something trying to escape. Tori kicked dirt over the embers. "It's gone," he whispered. "It's all gone." But beneath the ash, the camera still blinked faintly, its red light pulsing like a dying heartbeat, recording the truth they'd never outrun. Miles away, Cassie's body was being found. The phone calls began. A mother screaming, a cousin collapsing, and down a back road, two boys drove in silence, the smell of smoke clinging to them, the weight of what they'd done pressing hard on their chests. Tori spoke first. "Do you ever think she's still there?" Brian didn't answer. He just stared into the fog, where her reflection seemed to linger, bloodied, watching, waiting. The morning Cassie Jo Stoddard didn't come home began like any other Saturday in Pocatello. A chill hung in the air, hinting at snow. Her mother, Anna, stood by the kitchen window, watching the empty driveway. Cassie had promised to call after her babysitting shift, but the night stretched into silence. By noon, worry turned to dread. Calls went unanswered. Texts stayed unread. Her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, said he'd left the night before around 10:30. "She was fine," he repeated, his voice breaking. "She was just fine." The Stoddarts drove to Frank and Allison Contreras' house, where Cassie had been house-sitting. The quiet there felt wrong. The dog didn't bark. The lights were off. Anna's hand trembled as she turned the knob. The air inside was cold and still. Down the hall, a door hung half open. 2 steps forward, and then the scream. Cassie lay at the foot of the bed, pale, still, wrapped in a blood-stained blanket. Detectives arrived within the hour. Cassie had been stabbed over 30 times, each wound deliberate, controlled. Her hair was matted with blood, her fingers curled as if she'd fought back. Nothing was stolen, no forced entry. Just violence, pure and senseless. At first, police questioned Matt. He was the last to see her alive. But his alibi held. Security footage placed him miles away, his grief raw and real. Then came the others. Who knew she'd be alone that weekend? Only a few. Matt, Tori Adamczyk, and Brian Draper. That Monday, Tori and Brian walked into school, feigning shock. "Who would do that to Cassie?" Tori said. Brian nodded, voice calm, eyes wide. Their sadness felt rehearsed. Detectives noticed. During questioning, Brian fidgeted, glancing at Tori before speaking. They claimed they'd gone to see Kill Bill, Volume 2, but couldn't recall when it started or ended. When police checked the theater records, there were no tickets, no witnesses, no sign they'd ever been there. And in that first crack, the truth began to bleed through. As night fell over Pocatello, candles flickered outside the high school. The town whispered her name like a prayer. Cassie Jo Stoddard wasn't missing anymore. She was gone. And her killers were still smiling, still walking the same halls, pretending nothing had happened. For now. Detective Jared Furman had seen his share of brutality, but Cassie Jo Stoddard's murder left something in his chest that wouldn't unclench. A 16-year-old girl stabbed to death while house-sitting, no robbery, no forced entry, just violence, raw and senseless. There had to be a reason, or at least a pattern. But as he stood in that quiet suburban home, he felt only the echo of panic frozen in the air. The scene was too clean for passion, power cut, lights out, fear ripened before the strike. The forensic team catalogued every detail, the blood patterns, the footprints leading nowhere, the broken lamp beside the bed. Yet one thing was missing. Fingerprints. Whoever killed Cassie wore gloves. Furman started where killers often slip, the timeline. Matt Beckham's alibi was airtight, confirmed by friends and a time-stamped call log. That narrowed it down to the last 2 people who knew Cassie was alone, Tori Adamczyk and Brian Draper. Both were 17, both polite, intelligent, even liked by teachers. But when Furman questioned them, something felt off. Brian fidgeted constantly, his sentences half-finished. Tori stayed calm, almost too calm, his tone measured, his eyes calculating. They told the same story. They'd gone to a movie that night, Kill Bill Volume 2, then driven around before heading home. Simple, easy to verify. Except the theater manager didn't recall seeing them. The ticket log showed no sale matching their times. The next morning, Furman called them back in for another round of questions. "Which theater did you say you went to?" he asked casually. Brian stammered. Torre answered for him. "Who drove?" Furman pressed. Brian. "I did." Torre. "We switched." Their cracks widened. Small contradictions began to pile up like shards of broken glass, harmless alone, sharp together. Then came the turning point. On September 27th, officers executed a search warrant on Brian Draper's house. In his bedroom closet, behind a stack of old clothes, they found a black-handled knife, a pair of gloves, and a few rolls of film. The gloves matched the fibers found near Cassie's body. The knife blade bore faint, dried stains, blood later confirmed to be Cassie's. When confronted, Brian broke. He didn't weep. He unraveled. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he murmured, his words spilling like confession and excuse all at once. "We were just going to scare her." Detective Furryman leaned forward. "Who's we, Brian?" "Me and Tori," he whispered. The room went silent. He explained it all, how they planned the murder for weeks, inspired by their obsession with horror films and serial killers. They wanted to make their own real-life movie they'd snuck into the house while Cassie and Matt watched TV, cut the power, hid in the basement, and waited. When Matt left, they donned masks and gloves and returned to finish what they'd started. Foreman could barely contain his disgust. "You're telling me you filmed this?" Brian nodded weakly. "Parts of it." That single word, film, would become the spine of the case. The next search at Tori Adamchick's house uncovered a digital camcorder and a videotape labeled simply Project. On it were hours of footage, Tori and Brian planning, laughing, boasting. The day before the murder, Brian's voice crackled through the speakers. "We're gonna kill Cassie tomorrow. I'm sorry, Cassie, but it has to be done." Tori's voice followed, calm and certain. "We're real-life serial killers." When Furiman watched that tape, he didn't just see killers. He saw two boys who thought they were directors of their own horror movie, unaware that what they'd created wasn't cinema, but evil incarnate. As the evidence mounted, the town of Pocatello began to fracture under the weight of disbelief. These weren't monsters hiding in the woods or drifters from nowhere. They were high school kids, honor students, classmates. And yet their notebooks brimmed with dark sketches, kill lists, and manifestos about fame through murder. By the time the final interviews were done, both boys had confessed in pieces. But their stories, who led, who followed, who struck first, remained tangled in lies. One thing was certain: Cassie Jo Stoddart's killers were not ghosts anymore. They had names, faces, and now undeniable evidence. The question left hanging in the cold Idaho air was not who killed her. Everyone knew that now. It was why. The interrogation room was small, a metal table dividing predator from conscience. Fluorescent lights hummed above, throwing harsh shadows across Brian Draper's pale, shaking hands. A red light blinked on the recorder. "This is the interview of Brian Draper, September 27th, 2006. Detective Furiman leaned forward. "Brian, tell me what really happened that night." Brian's voice trembled. "We didn't mean for it to go that far. It was supposed to be like a movie. What kind of movie? Like Scream. Tori said we could be famous. He wanted to film everything Furiman's pen scratched the pad. And when you went back into the house?" Brian's breathing quickened. "We waited in the basement," Tori whispered. "Now." "We put on the masks. I had one knife, he had the other." He began to cry. She screamed, asked why. Tori said, "Just shut up." She ran. I stabbed her once. Tori wouldn't stop. Furiman's voice hardened. "You left her to die." Brian nodded. "He said we had to finish it." Hours later, Tori Adamchick sat in that same chair. His tone was steady, almost smug. "Brian's lying. He killed her. We just wanted to scare her." Furiman slid a camcorder across the table and pressed play. On the screen, Brian's nervous laughter echoed. Tori's calm voice followed. "We're going to kill Cassie. We're not joking. We'll see you in hell, Cassie." Tori's smirk faded as he watched himself confess before the murder even happened. "Still want to tell me it was a prank?" Foreman asked. Tori clenched his fists. "Brian made me do it." But the tapes told the truth. Footage of them scouting the house, planning every step, choosing their knives. Another video showed them hours after the murder, grinning in the dark. Brian looked into the camera. "We just killed Cassie." "There was so much blood," Tori's voice followed, soft and chilling. "I stabbed her in the throat." I saw the life leave her eyes. The detectives watched in silence. These weren't boys in shock. They were reveling in what they'd done. By the time the questioning ended, both stories were twisted in lies, but the evidence was irrefutable. The recordings captured casual evil, minutes of arrogance that sealed their fate. Outside, cameras flashed across courthouse steps. The headlines called them the Scream Killers of Idaho. Cassie's smile filled every screen, frozen in time. And beside her image, two teenagers stared back, faces void of remorse, recorded forever in the horror they created. The Bannock County Courthouse became a stage where two teenage murderers faced the world they had destroyed. In 2007, Brian Draper and Tori Adamshick stood trial for killing Cassie Jo Stoddart, two boys who thought murder would make them famous. Prosecutor James Dunn told the jury, "They didn't lose control. They planned this. They filmed this. They wanted to become killers." The evidence was undeniable: knives, gloves, and the camcorder footage. On screen, the boys laughed before the murder. Tori boasting, Brian agreeing. The jury watched in silence. Each blamed the other. Brian claimed fear. Tori claimed manipulation. Cassie's family endured every moment. The photos, the descriptions, the proof she'd fought for her life. When the interrogation tapes played, gasps filled the courtroom. Then the footage, their confessions, their laughter. The verdict was swift, both guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. Life in prison, no parole. Neither flinched. Outside, headlines called it "Justice for Cassie," but her family knew better. Justice couldn't bring her back. Years passed. In prison, Tori wrote letters claiming he'd been misjudged. Brian turned to religion, speaking of forgiveness. But the tapes never faded. Their voices, their laughter, their pride. Cassie's family created a scholarship in her name, ensuring her kindness outlived her killer's infamy. Her mother said, "We live every day with what they did." But Cassie's name will not fade. Theirs will. Detective Foreman said it best. They wanted to make a horror movie. But horror movies end. This one never did. Cassie Jo Stoddart wanted to tell stories. Instead, she became one. She should have lived.